Good afternoon, everyone. If you would like to speak on the citizen comments, please sign up now. Good afternoon, and thank you all for coming out to our special city council meeting. I would like to say a special welcome to 2111G Girl Scouts. Boy Scouts, we went on Boy Scouts. Hello, and thank you all for coming to learn about our municipal government and how we lead. Let the record show that Councilmember Sagara is absent, or he may be en route here. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda? Councilmember Boyd, you already clicked on. Councilmember Boyd?
Make a motion to approve the agenda.
Councilmember Adams?
Second.
All in favor, yes? All opposed, no. Motion carries 6-0. Tonight, council, we will be hearing from our residents. This public hearing on the budget, and we are here to listen and receive. And once you get this information and you reach out to your constituents, then when we come back and we have the opportunity to go in more details about discussing the budget, then you will have reached out to the majority, if possible, residents to come back with some input if changes are needed. But tonight, we are here to listen to the residents and their feedback on the budget. We will start our citizen comments. You will have 4 minutes with 1 minute time allotted for our city council if you would like to respond or make a statement. But as I stated earlier, we are just here to receive information from our residents. And you still will have plenty of time to go in more detail with staff and Mr. Cagle on the budget. But tonight is a public hearing. The first person is Melissa Brown. Good evening. You have 4 minutes.
I'm going to start by saying that this needs to be redone with proper legal notice. Even if you look within the budget, what the city manager put in there, we're in violation of the Texas Local Governing Code because there was no notice posted about the public hearing 10 days prior. In fact, on the city's webpage, it was just posted Thursday evening. So we are out of compliance in that regard. This needs to be redone probably August 6th if you go based on the rest of the schedule. Looking through this budget, a third of our taxes are going to debt service, yet there are calls to add more debt to this budget. CO bonds, we just added $4.3 million approximately that was approved for a park that we can't afford to operate. We have about $500,000 going to downtown revitalization now that it is its own department. So it's a little bit tricky, a little bit hard to follow because you have to go back and forth and you have to actually look at last year's budget on one page, this year's budget on another page. Public outreach, which is what generally covers the events, has increased by $40,000 this year. Facade grants have more than doubled from $50,000 to $105,000. For that reason, anyone who owns a business in downtown Killeen should be recusing themselves from this budget because this causes there to be a direct benefit to your business. In the budget preview that was given on June 2nd, it says that a large amount of money is coming, increase in expenses is coming from new laws for Department of Labor on overtime. The only problem is I've looked through every single department in the general fund and every other fund. And not only is, generally speaking, there no increase in overtime, for the most part, it's staying the same. So I would like to know where the actual differences are coming from. The Rosa Herford Center was advertised to be another big increase, and reason for that of over $100,000. However, when you actually go back and you look, everything in the Rosa Herford budget was in the rec services budget. It just got moved down to a different area this year. The total for that comes to $409. Last year, the rec service budget was only about $460. So that's not the increase of $170,000 that it said in the preview. I think more importantly than what is in the budget is what's not in the budget. So let's talk about maybe ballistic shields for the organized crime unit. That's not there. $8,000, we can't find $8,000 to keep our officers safe. That's ridiculous. Let's talk about the fact that we have, obviously, as we know, firefighters that are not included in this budget. And we're going to cross our fingers, hold our breath, and hope and pray we get the SAFER grant. That's not a plan. Hope and prayers are not plans. It's not how you run a city. There's nothing in here to allow the parks to have consistent electricity at the pavilions still. I've been out there. Parents are out there trying to let their kids play. There's no way for them to charge their phones, do anything else. It starts getting dark, and the lights are not on a timer still. Let's also talk about the fact that apparently we are so hard up in this budget, we can't afford to have this room open all the time or more than 15 minutes before the meeting starts. So I'd like to know who came up with that policy. It was never discussed in here. Can't really be a fiscal thing, can it? Not when we have a mayor who has an office that has an increase in that budget. So let's talk about that. Let's figure out why we can't allow citizens to be in a public space that's not restricted, and why that isn't something that can be fit into this budget. That's ridiculous also. Stop trying to restrict the citizens not only from what we say, but from where we can be in public property.
Let the record show that Councilmember Sagara is here. Our next speaker will be Michael Fornino. Good evening, sir. You have 4 minutes.
With regard to the budget, when I looked at the presentation, once again, it comes up to issue of disabled veterans tax exemption. Okay? My problem with that is it's getting to the point of being offensive. You like to tout, oh, we love the veterans, we love the fort, and all that. But the moment we're not politically expedient, I myself, if you're not aware or have forgotten, am a disabled veteran. Pretty high percentage. Not a whole 100% yet, but I will probably be within 100% very soon. When it comes to this, get off our backs. All right. When it comes to taxes, we have a revenue problem. Our sales tax are down. Well, if this were a farm and we only grew one crop every single year, just like a farm, R1 housing, R1 housing, R1 housing. Sooner or later, the soil fails, the crops fail, and you've got nothing. Imagine, if you will, all this foresight that everybody keeps saying that this council has had. I'd be willing to venture over the last 30 years. The faces have changed, but the same bad ideas that emanate from this dais remain. Imagine, if you will, what this town would look like if we actually had a heavy industry, manufacturing, a large company, such as Dell, such as Toyota, which wanted to be here. We'd have the fort on one side and heavy main industries that would hire to retire on the other side. That would have made us an economic juggernaut for Central Texas. But no, all we want to do is build single-family homes. In circulating a recall petition, doesn't matter which one, talking with people, whether they were going to sign it or not. Their chief complaint is there is no place to work around here. I've got names if somebody wants to check me as to who I talked to, but the theme remains. They're echoing things that I've been echoing in front of this council, this lectern here, and when it was over at the water company for 10 years. Where are the jobs? Where's the desirability factor to actually be in Killeen? People shouldn't have to commute. Our our main selling point for a city and a community should not be, yeah, live here so that you can commute an hour to Austin, if you're lucky, to hit the traffic right, or an hour up to Waco, or anywhere but Killeen. Just live here and pay property taxes? That's not the model for success. Everybody wants to wave the banner how much they love this town. Well, give us something to love. Give the people in this town an honest way to earn a living and be fruitful and multiply. I have touted KISD for the amazing educational and technical opportunities that they offer. I dare say that the young ladies behind me, as they're up and coming, they will take advantage, and I hope that they do, take advantage of early college, any technical training, vocational training they can get. However, the sad fact is that the formula that this council and successive iterations thereof, there's no place for them to use it once they achieve it. We keep funding everybody else's success but our own. This is not how you build a community. Not a sustainable one at that. Sooner or later, we're going to run out of places to put single-family homes. I've talked with prominent developers and their extended associates. Oh, we'll just put the industries behind the houses. Nobody in fancy houses wants 18-wheel traffic hauling hazmat, which is restricted by federal law. Cannot happen. Can't have that going to all this available land behind that. There is no foresight. There is no vision. Get one.
2111 Boy Scouts, tonight we are talking about the budget. The budget is extremely important. We're having that public hearing to have the residents to give their input. The council will go out to the other constituents because we have 159, give or take 160,000 people. So the input that is given tonight is very important. We take that input, and the council as a whole will make a decision. As we stated earlier when I met with you about Central Texas College, Texas A&M, Central Texas, UT, Fort Cavazos, have all these components come together, and we really focus on economic development and growth, and that can only happen as we come collectively. And this budget is so important because we're limited to the amount of funding that we have. So this council of 7 will make a decision for the whole city on one budget to ensure our first responders are our top priority. Our downtown Killeen is a top priority, as I spoke to you back in the room. The south side is growing, but the north side was left behind. So that is our top priority, to bring the north up with the south. So just listen. Mr. Cagle will be giving factual information for you, and we can just learn from that. With that being said, do any other council member have any input or would like to say anything? Thank you. We will move on. Madam Secretary, public hearing.
PH 24029, hold a public hearing on the proposed fiscal year 2025 annual budget.
Thank you. Council, you have 3 minutes to speak, 3 times each. Mr. Cagle.
Mayor and Council, tonight we have a short presentation. We've given a much longer presentation at a previous meeting, and as you know, Council's been involved with this budget since back in February, and you can rest assured that this meeting tonight was properly noticed, advertised in the paper on July 7th. So as I said, this is short. Tonight's a budget public hearing, and I'll give some very, very high-level information. And then on August 6th, we'll have to set the proposed tax rate by taking a record vote. That's not necessarily the tax rate you have to adopt. You can adopt one lower, but the rate that you need to set on August 6th needs to be the maximum that you would consider. Otherwise, we'd have to start the process over if you would want to go higher. And then, if necessary, if changes are made in this budget that increase spending, another public hearing would be necessary on August 20. And then on September 3rd, tax rate public hearing to adopt the budget, the tax rate, ratify the tax revenue increase, and set the tax rate. Talking about the tax rate, this is the high-level information, and that you can see that the total taxable value was up put it right there, 1.92%. And with the change in the tax rate, the total tax levy would be up 7.98%. Now, that's not the amount of spending that's going up, because as we learned, there's a lot of other areas where revenue dropped. But that's the information on the tax base. Then when we look at it historically, all the way back to 2007, you can see that our tax rate was 69.5 cents in 2007. And then it peaked at 74.98 cents in 2015, and it stayed that way all the way to 2020, when it started dropping and reached the lowest point on this chart of 62.08 cents in 24, and the proposed rate of 65.73 cents. That would result in $70.5 million in tax revenue. And yes, we do talk about disabled veterans exemption, but if you'll notice, every time we talk about it, we talk about the state of Texas reimbursing us for the disproportionate impact that we have on our community. And they've recognized that disproportionate impact because they do reimburse not only the city of Killeen, but a number of other cities in the state. And the rationale behind that, this was a benefit that was given by all Texans and should be paid for equally by all Texans, but that's not the way it falls. And that's why we talk about it on a consistent basis, because we're asking the state of Texas to reimburse us 100% for that disproportionate impact. Right now, we lose almost $13 million in revenue, and the state reimburses us about $2 million. It's a legitimate thing to talk about. It's very significant, and the growth is very significant as well. And the reason we show you this presentation, we show a line right here. And every year after that, the growth in the veterans exemption has outpaced all the new construction in the city of Killeen. For example, if you take 2019, there we go, right here, there was the total increase, let me clear that again, the total increase in the DV exemption was $132 million, and all the new construction in the city of Killeen that year was $127 million. Every year after that has continued that trend. It's a significant impact on the city of Killeen. It's not saying anything about veterans, negative or otherwise. They consume city services at the same rate as any other citizen, and that costs money. And so when you exempt one class of citizens from paying taxes, then the other citizens have to pick that up. And the voters in the state of Texas said that was fine, and I understand that. But we are disproportionately impacted, and as I said, the state of Texas has recognized that. That's why we continue to bring it up, because these numbers are changing much faster than the state can keep up. And in fact, when the state of Texas proposed this, they do what's called a fiscal note. They stated the impact for all the cities in the state of Texas. Right now, the city of Killeen, the impact on the city of Killeen is greater than they projected the impact for the entire state of Texas. So yes, it's a significant issue and it needs to be discussed. This is the proposed tax rate. The current rate for 2024 and the proposed amount for 2025. That is a 3.65 cent rate increase. This is graphically similar to the chart we showed earlier, where the tax rate peaked in 2012, stayed the same in 2015 and stayed the same out to 2020, and then the tax rate started dropping. And yes, there was a comment made about 1/3 of the tax rate is debt service. That's actually fairly low and not uncommon for growing cities. When cities grow, they need infrastructure. So think about the things that that debt has been issued for if we didn't do it. You wouldn't have a Lions Club Park with a rec center and a water park. There are a number of major, W.S. Young, Tremere, a number at Rosewood, a number of major roadways through the city. We wouldn't have a civic center. We wouldn't have the transfer station. I don't know what we would be doing. I can list all the things that we've issued debt for in the past, and I can't imagine many people that would think we didn't need those things. There's always someone that thinks we shouldn't spend. What one person's essential expenditure is another person's waste. That's the thing. We live in a democracy, and there's disagreement over how this money is spent. But I would argue that the level of our debt, and we showed you in the last presentation that it's actually been declining on a per capita basis or as measured against our tax base. Now, the last slide I'll leave you with shows all of our funds. Obviously, the major fund that we have is the general fund, and what you show is our projected fund balance, beginning fund balance, 25 revenues, the expenditures. That results in a change in fund balance, then our projected ending fund balance, and the percent that fund balance reserve. So when our budgets are balanced one way or another, you'll see a zero here as we have in the general fund. But one thing I want to point out, the increase from 24 to 25 in expenditures here for the general fund is 3.89%. That, depending on when you want to measure inflation, that's about what inflation is now, but the impact that we have is not just inflation, it's growth. So our growth in expenditures in the general fund is below the rate of inflation and growth combined. You can say the same thing in the water and sewer fund. That's the next line. It's essentially our second biggest operating fund, and it went up 3.58%. Now, the solid waste fund is a little different. We have not increased the residential rate there, but the expenditures went up 10.82% because we're catching up on some capital. Plus, we added a litter crew, and we added a member of four actually to our residential routes, large pickup, because we had one person picking up some really heavy stuff, or the driver had to stop, get out. Makes us much more efficient on those bulk collections to have two people on the back of the truck. Not only that, it's a lot safer. And we'll, while we don't have high workers' comp costs in this city, actually among some of the lowest in the state, it will definitely keep them low and keep them from going up, plus treat our workers better. Then the drainage utility fund is next, and that's up 4.9%. Now, the aviation fund is actually a good story. It's up 37.66%. Now, the aviation fund operates generating its own revenue. It doesn't get tax money. So the reason that is up so much is with the ICSA agreement with the federal government, where we're taking over more of the maintenance operations at Killeen Regional Airport, and they're paying us for it. So we're adding people and equipment. And that's the reason the aviation fund is up. But I will say this, you compare the aviation fund today to where it was 5 years ago, and there was a lot of concern that we were going to have to start subsidizing the aviation fund with tax dollars. And we are very, very far from that today in operating in an industry, an airline industry that's in incredible flux. We've done a number of things out there, the ICSA primary in this budget, but all the construction you see going out there with covered parking and the solar generation that's going on out there, significantly reducing our electricity use, which was one of our largest electric users in the city is the airport. Second's going to be the convention center. But pleased to report that the aviation fund is in great shape now and even looking better in the future. The Golf Enterprise Fund is new. It had been part of the general fund budget, but once again, the golf fund stands on its own. It's not supported by tax dollars. It's operated and maintained by the fees that people pay that go to play golf. and it's in good shape, and the expenditures are actually down about 2% at the golf course. The debt service fund, receives part of the tax rate, part of the property tax dollars that go to pay debt, and it is up 1.95%. The street maintenance fund is up 0.04%. And then the hotel occupancy fund is actually down almost 20%, but it's still in pretty good shape. We were able to achieve a lot in the hotel occupancy fund. And by the time the October 1 comes around, the 25 budget starts, I think we will finally have all the short-term rental things adjusted and will be part of the operational revenue stream. Then the one that does look to stand out is capital projects funds, because you see here a negative, 1.83 million negative, that we are spending more than we're bringing in. But that is not an ongoing operation fund, that you issue debt, you get the money, and then you spend it over time, and it's not necessarily replenished, or it receives excess fund balance from the operating fund. So it's not unusual. And that's exactly what we should be doing. We should be bringing that fund balance down to zero, actually. And then fleet services is actually flat. Our health insurance fund is up 1.74%. IT, it's up 15%, but we've made some significant investments in IT and software, especially for the police department, but also citywide in human resources and finance department. We're well on our way in implementing the new financial and HR software. And then the risk management fund is down 3.35%. Okay, and with that, I will end it and be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Cagle. There are several questions I have from you that residents, the two that spoke, you already answered one of them, and veterans, and you answered debt service, but I wrote down the rest and that I heard. With that being said, Councilmember Segarra.
Thank you, Mayor. And first off, I just want to give you kudos, because one of the most difficult thing of a city is balancing a budget. I don't know if a lot of people realize that. You know, we as we continue to grow, we have expenditures, and we have to look at different revenue sources, and that's always a challenge. And I can tell you that firsthand. You know, when we had a shortage a few years ago, and I know KASD had a shortage, big one here lately, and even our country hasn't balanced the budget, I don't know when. And so it is a task in itself, because as we grow, you know, we want to add employees, we want to continue to add services that people need. And with that, I know that a lot of times, you know, I think most people understand it, but there's always people that don't understand how a city brings in revenue. And, you know, I think the number one source, if you can confirm that, is property taxes. Is that right?
Yes, sir. Property tax is number one, sales tax is number two.
Sales tax is number two. And you mentioned the veterans exemption, and you know, we always say that, you know, by no means we're a big veteran community, and that's nobody's fault here. So we're not saying that it's the veterans' fault, by no means. And this is what we call unfunded mandates by the state.
Yes,
and
sir.
all we're trying to do is make sure, because I think that as I speak to our veterans, they understand that. There's a few people that don't understand that, but one of the things that they always ask is just to make sure that we don't cut their services, because as a city, you know, they want to make sure that we have our police force there protecting them, our fire department, our streets, all that costs money. And if you're not bringing in that tax revenue, then that means that we may not have a balanced budget, because we have more expenses than revenue coming in. And so by no means are we trying to take away from what the veterans rightly deserve. You know, it's something that the state created, and we're just asking them, as a state, not as a community, but as a state to compensate us for these unfunded mandates, because it's truly, we're one of the unique cities that has that. And so I just wanted to bring attention to that because I know that it's always brought about that. But other than that, property tax is very important. The other part is housing, property taxes, as mentioned, is very important. And when we sell a property, it's people that have to get qualified. I think that about 60% of the people that buy homes are veterans. And anybody that buys a house has to have income coming in because most of them are financed through a mortgage. And so that means good. They're all working and all that. So I just wanted to point that out too. My time's up, right?
Thank you, Councilmember Zagar. Councilmember Adams.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Out of curiosity, I know when we did our priorities meeting, you mentioned we had the trend for sales tax was going low. Is that today? Have you seen a change, a positive change, or is it still?
Well, the past couple of checks have been up a little.
Okay.
But this is not just a Killeen issue, it's statewide issue. And what you see over the past, say, 18 months, it's the rate of increase has been declining. We're still in positive territory, but where it was at one point, if you go back 18 months, maybe 10 or 12%, today we're down to 1 or 2%. And that's not the exact number for statewide, but the trend is the same for all cities statewide.
Thanks. And then the other question I had was, I saw you said we were looking good in the hotel occupancy tax.
Yes.
Do you have an idea of what percentage of that came from the short-term rentals?
I do.
And if you don't have, you can give it to me.
Well,
later.
I don't have it off the top of my head,
Okay.
but we'll get the answer to you.
Thanks. That's all I have.
Mr. Yes, I'm sorry, did you want the extra minute? Councilman Sagara want to ask extra minute. Council, y'all okay? Okay, please, you have an extra minute.
No, I just wanted to continue on that because I was talking about housing, and we in a community, I think that housing, the reason that it expands is because there's a lot of people here that want to live in this community, and affordability. And I say that because I've heard this before, that there are a lot of people commute, and I've seen people that have actually, they live here and they work in Austin, but that was a decision because they wanted to move to our community. And I just wanted to point that out because the number one reason, and we're getting a lot of people to do that, they come from Austin to live here. They want to work there, but they live here. And when we sell them a house, the number one reason that they say they do that is because they can afford a house here, affordability, and that's it. And we see that more and more and more. And even though our home prices have gone up, we are still the most affordable, even more affordable than our neighbors, like Harger Heights and all that. We don't have to go far. And so that is kind of the reason that people enjoy buying homes here. We cannot control that. We cannot say, no, you can't buy a house until you build a factory. That has nothing to do with us. But as I was pointing out, before you can even buy a house, you have to have a job. And I'm gonna point that out, that we have one of the highest home ownerships in the country. And not only just that, but minority. I pointed that out before. It was in USA News Report. Minorities buy houses, and that's a huge accomplishment for a community like ours. And a lot of that has to do with our veterans, because a lot of our veterans retire here. So it is a community that values their service, and they in turn want to make Killeen our home. And so we definitely need to do everything we can to make sure we're taking care of it. We have a lot of them here. We need to make sure we're taking care of our veterans. And by that, what I get back to means that we don't want to cut any type of service that they're in need. And I think that the budget that you presented does that, and it does it so well. I think that the work that you guys put in there sometimes goes unnoticed because it's done behind the scenes. but I'm one that I seen that firsthand. And again, I want to repeat how difficult it is to bring a balanced budget. And with that, last thing I just want to say, we appreciate what you and your staff done. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor, just a couple of comments. I don't think home builders build houses because nobody wants them. It's a supply and demand thing. But in the state of Texas, it's a very developer-friendly, pro-development legal structure. The only way you could stop development if you wanted to is just disannex everything. And the real reason that you don't do that is because you want to be able to have some sort of say in what is built next door to you. And a lot of those laws are changing now about our ETJ and annexation and different issues. But the impact that the council can have, while you can't tell someone forever they can't develop their property, you can have a lot of impact on how it's developed. And this council and the council since I've been here have been making changes to break with the past to make those developments better than they have been. And I think if you go look at the new developments that are being built now compared to 20 years ago, you'll notice a lot of difference. And I think that's a very important thing to keep in mind.
Thank you. And I just want to say that Councilmember Sagara is the president of the Workforce Solution Board, and they talk about the jobs that's coming in and the economic development growth. So the information that he is sharing with you is correct information. And if you don't believe it, you can always go up to the Workforce Solution and ask them for the data and the information. And I thank you for pointing that out from your expertise as the board president. So the questions that I have for you that were presented, and I may miss some of them, but I just want to make sure for clarification. It's the downtown revitalization, more funding has gone down for that in the events, the facade grant, the DOL overtime with no increase in overtime in the budget. The Rosa Herford Center, I know, you want me to go one by one?
Yes, ma'am, that'd be better.
Okay, so we can start off, you talked about the debt service, but downtown revitalization and more funding going to the events downtown.
Yes, ma'am, we are doing that. As you know, we had funded that with ARPA money. It's one of the very, very few things that we used ARPA money for that you could say was some sort of operational expense. And that is something that I believe the council and the community wanted to continue. Now, it's not like hiring a police officer. When you've got them, you've got their salary the year after the year after. We could stop all those events, but we don't believe anybody wants to do that. So yes, there were increases. And the downtown facade grant has been very popular. We've had a lot of success with it. And we have more applications than we have money for in the current year, and that's why we increased the budget for next year.
Thank you, and you can answer these together. The DOL overtime, the ballistic shield, and the firefighters safer grant.
Sure. Well, as I've said, the budget is a summation of lots of pluses and minuses. So while the budget was up, say the general fund budget was up 3.89%, you notice that we gave a 4% pay increase. Salaries are about 70% of our budget, but 4% was just for the classified, the non-civil service. On the police and fire side, they're going to average closer to 7% because of the steps. So a significant portion of our budget went up by an average of probably 5.5%, yet the overall budget only went up 3.89%, which tells you we had to make cuts. So yeah, there were other cuts in overtime. What we were showing in that presentation were there were costs that were passed on to us by the federal government that we had to recognize. We had to recognize those costs, and then we had to make changes to deal with them. And then
The safer grant and
Yeah.
the ballistic shield for $8,000.
well, if you remember, there was something a little over $8 million worth of requests that were not included in the
That
budget.
is correct.
So to grab one thing off a long list and say you don't care about the safety of your police officers is incorrect. We've done a whole lot on the police side to improve their safety, to improve wages, to improve the quality of the fleet. You just can't do it all in 1 year. And Ms. Brown knows. She was on council when we talked about opening a new fire station and how we were going to do it. And the reason those firefighters aren't included in the budget, and she very well knows there's a plan to deal with that if we don't get the SAFER grant.
Also, parks and pavilions and the Rosa Herford Center, that the park money was in the budget, and Rosa Herford, $100,000 over, that was stated.
Well, first of all, especially in Long Branch Park, we keep the electricity turned off at the pavilions. That's for folks that want to rent the pavilions and then have electrical appliances, whether it's speakers or lights or whatever it may be, that they want to plug in. We don't leave the electricity on all day, all the time, for anyone to come plug up whatever they want to plug up. That's just the way we operate, and Ms. Brown doesn't like it, and she's never liked it, and there we go. And I would just have to
Ms.
say,
Brown, please do
I
not
guess-
interrupt Mr. Cagle. Mr. Cagle, stay
Yes, ma'am.
focused.
I brought it up because I'm responding to the question. And yes, Rosa Herford has cost more money than we anticipated. That's not unusual when you get into the level of rehab that we're doing at Rosa Herford. But we are committed to doing it right. So when our seniors and the rest of the community moves back into using that facility, it's going to be done correctly. Did it cost more money? Sure.
Yes, sir. And also, I think, I'm not sure, I don't remember, Mr. Connell came and presented KEDC in reference to the jobs that's coming to Killeen. We talked about Dave and Buster. The question was that we don't have manufacturing industry here. We don't really have jobs. Councilmember Sagara answered some of that, but we have purchased land for industrial park, Park 2. Can you go into more details? Not so much about what
No, I
kind
can.
of... Yeah.
We've had two of the biggest economic development projects in the history of the community just open up in the business park in support of Samsung. One $50 million new construction, another was a $100 million expansion. While they don't generate large number of employees, they do have some very high-paid employees there. And yes, Killeen Economic Development Corporation has purchased land south on 195 to create another business park, because the current business park is about full. You can see some vacant land there now, but most of it's already committed and going to be built on. And not only the land on south on 195, they're working on land, excuse me, to the east of the current business park for expansion as well.
Yes, sir. Thank you. There may be more questions for you
Yes,
because
ma'am.
I'm opening up the public hearing. Public hearing is open. Melissa Brown, welcome back. You have 4 minutes.
First of all, I apologize, Mr. Cagle. I looked it up. It was there on the 7th. It was just really hard to find. So I do apologize for having that incorrect. However, we are 3 weeks into this with the council having the budget, the public having the budget. Clearly, council doesn't know the majority of what's in the budget. And after 1 month, this is our first opportunity to speak on what's in it, knowing that In past years, it has been on every single agenda once it was presented so that citizens had ample opportunities. There were town halls so that so that the public had ample opportunity. This year, apparently, we don't want ample opportunity. So let's find other ways that we can cut money out of the budget. How about we give up some of the car allowances for people who are making over $100,000 a year? Because if you're making that much money, we don't need to supplement your driving in your vehicle. You should be able to cover that yourself or live within your means. Let's stop giving away tax-exempt properties to for-profit corporations for anywhere between 15, 75, and 99 years. And why is that a big deal? Because when you go to Austin and you tell them, oh my gosh, this is killing our community, we can't sustain not having all the money from all of the 100% disabled veterans, and then they see that we're giving away decades worth of tax exemptions, do you think they believe us? I wouldn't believe you. Let's try to make a little bit more sense next time. The city council, $36,820 budgeted for professional services in FY25, $17,000 spent this year, $105,000 for training and travel. Let's talk about the $39,000 worth of subscriptions and memberships, sponsorships for $13,000, food for $9,000. I think there's plenty that can be cut right there. Yes, I did only mention one of the things that's not in there, but if you want to give me more than 4 minutes, I will stand here and we can talk about every one of them and why they should be important. In the meantime, I'd like to ask the council to go ahead and reconsider your governing standards to allow us more time, because one of your goals in the budget for FY25 is to foster meaningful community engagement to ensure the voices and needs of all members are heard and addressed. That starts with allowing us to speak more. As far as the golf course, our fund balance is a little low in that. It's an enterprise fund according to the budget, according to the financial governing standards. It's supposed to be 18 to 22% fund balance. It currently will be at 16 at the end of the year. Let's talk about the debt. There's a difference between what is voted on by the citizens and what is issued without our consent. The tax base and the population has been increasing, so of course that per capita rate is going to go down. When you have more people, you could have the same level of debt, and per capita, per tax base is going to appear lower. That's the way math and numbers work. Why are we paying a litter crew instead of using community service? Even at our municipal court, we have started utilizing community service more to get away from fines and jail time, to make sure that people are able to be in compliance, but also at the same time not have to worry about, can I afford that, or am I going to sit in jail? Let's use that to help clean up the city. Let's make them proud of the city by having them involved in it, hands-on. I don't have enough time to go through this whole budget and show you where you can save money, where it's over budget, where there's unnecessary spending, but building brand new $12 million parks is not where it needs to be spent. We don't need a $12 million park. We need roads. For $12 million, we could have built a street.
Michael Fornino, good evening and welcome back. You have 4 minutes.
Try to retread as little ground has already been going on. But first correction, Mr. Cagle, we live in a republic, not a democracy. We utilize the democratic process, but this is a republic. A republic is not democracy. Democracy is two wolves and a rabbit trying to decide what's for dinner. A republic gives a rabbit a fighting chance. That being said, all I'm hearing, though, is, oh, the houses, we're going to build more houses, nice houses, so we get more property taxes. I will counter again. We have had a problem, and this is not the first time that I've brought this up. We have had a problem of maintaining what we've got. All we keep getting is growth for growth's sake. That doesn't add up. Going back to what I said in my first remarks, what happens when we run out of land and no place to put more houses? People will spend money if they're earning the money. Sales tax could be making up for that deficit. Okay? Again, I'm not going to apologize for my service, and others who are more broken than I am, missing limbs and completely ubats mentally because of their service. Okay? Whatever breaks they get, we earned. If people en masse, not a couple of jobs that earned a decent wage, if people had across the board a lot more economic opportunities to earn more, they'll spend it where they earn it. All these folks who are commuting to Austin, Waco, Temple, they're spending most of their waking hours in other towns. They're buying lunch, fuel. They get a call from their spouse, hey, go order that couch at the furniture store. That's where they're spending their money. They get home after commuting an hour. I grew up in the shadow of New York City. I know what commuter culture looks like. These folks get out of their car, and the last thing they want to do is get in their house, start to get comfortable, and go back out and do something that they could have taken care of while they were on their lunch break. That's just the way it works. If we had the money to spend, it would be spent here. Growth for growth's sake. Talking about funds for the roads. My calculation might be off by a couple of numbers here, but we've got close to 2,000 miles of road just in Killeen as it is right now. We can't maintain that. So what's our solution? Let's build more housing developments and more roads. That's just insane. That makes zero sense, and it's just growth for growth's sake. Then you got this plan, let's spend money to take Rancier down to one lane. I mean, what we're spending money on doesn't make much sense when we could be earning more money from our own people. I mean, God's honest truth, people get sent to Killeen. They're not coming to Killeen. Yeah, some people for the cheap housing after they've already made it in life. I mean, it can be a little bit of a retirement package. If you're a disabled veteran and you went into business or won the lottery or whatever, it's a comfortable nest to stay in. But for the people who were born and raised here, go to KISD. Ask them if they can do a poll and say, of the graduates of last 10 years, how many of those folks who took full advantage of all the education opportunities, as previously mentioned, how many of those folks hung around Killeen to use their skill set in Killeen? I would say that that's probably going to be a very small percentage because there's no places for them to use those skill sets. We need to keep and take care of what we've got. The care and feeding of our own, the generations behind us. That's the ones we're trying to blaze the trail and make their life a little easier. We're not making their
Thank
life
you.
possible here.
For the residents that are watching and the residents that may be new to tonight's budget hearing, please go to www.killeentexas.gov. And if you have any questions there, our city manager, our finance director, Mr. Tangerlin, or you can reach out to your council member at large or your district council member if you have questions concerning the budget. And that's www.killeentexas.gov. And tonight we will not be deciding the budget, but this is just a public hearing. Public hearing is closed. Can I get a motion to approve PH-24-029 to set the date to consider adoption of the budget? Councilmember Solomon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move to set the date of September 3rd, 2024, to consider the adoption of the budget.
Mayor Pro Tem Gonzalez.
I second that.
We have a motion and a second to consider adoption of the budget to set the date for September 3rd, 2024. All in favor, yes. All opposed, no. Motion carries 7-0. Madam Secretary, whenever you're ready.
PH 24024. Hold a public hearing and consider an ordinance authorizing the 2024-2025 Annual Action Plan describing use of funds and authorizing application for and allocation of community development block grant and home investment partnerships. program funds, second of 2 public hearings. The caption of the ordinance reads, an ordinance authorizing submittal of the 2024-2025 program year annual action plan describing the use of funds and authorizing the application for, allocation, and expenditure of $1,326,229 in program year 2024-2025, fiscal year 2025 Community Development Block Grant funds, and the use of $20,121.73 in reprogrammed CDBG funds, and the application for, allocation, and expenditure of $533,770 in Home Investment Partnership program funds, and the use of $97,858.94 in reprogrammed home funds, providing a severability clause and providing an effective date.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Ms. McNair. Good evening, ma'am.
How are you?
Fine, and you, ma'am.
Thank you, I'm fine. So,
This is the second public
this-
hearing.
Yes, second public hearing. This presentation was provided last month. I will go through at your pleasure if you would like.
Council? That's something, somebody said, somebody said, This is the same one she went through last month. No,
Okay.
no, ma'am.
All righty.
All right, we will now, thank you, Ms. McNair. We will now open up the public hearing. Melissa Brown, welcome back.
So as I was walking in here this afternoon, I overheard some citizens explaining that this is not the city's money, this is grant money that comes to the city. And they're right about that, but it is the city council's responsibility to make sure that it is dispersed in an appropriate manner. So let's start with families in crisis that is not getting the amount of money they requested. Council had to come in and help them last year. They rely a lot on not just the grants, but also on donations, grants from other locations. The county has slowed down or stopped giving those. Everyone's ran out of ARPA money, and there are a lot more hands out than people can help. So unless you want to deal with potentially later on this year having another crisis, maybe you should think about it very, very minimum funding than what they requested for. Meals on Wheels, which the Pro Tem just did a wonderful town hall touting Meals on Wheels, but we're only going to give them half of what they need. Half. Okay, so we should definitely see if that's a priority or not. And then we go into the CEU, the Community Engagement Unit. They only asked for 10,000 and they're only getting recommended for 5,000. So we can't come up with that other 5,000. Okay. Then we've got public service funding. This is where it gets fun because a lot of this is stuff that would come back to the city. But the reunification program, staff is recommending $30,000 more than what the board recommended at 70, and either way, it's still less than what they wanted for a full-time licensed master social worker. That includes salary and fringe. The City of Killeen's elderly transportation program is getting a quarter of what they asked for. Quarter. Meanwhile, if we go down to what the city is getting, the city is going to get about $120,000 this year to pay for code enforcement officers. That is something that should be coming out of our general fund. So when we're talking about whether or not it's city money, that's money that could be going to all those other programs because if we look at what it says here, that's all part of the public housing facilities and improvements, so that's all eligible. It's not broken up into different things, so that can all be that 65%. Split it up, right? All right, then we look down a little bit further, economic development. I can understand not funding that one right at this time. Reunification Center. Another $600,000 on top of the $1 million that we've set aside, on top of the money that was set aside last year. Building inspections, $120,000 to just go tear down buildings. By the way, we're tearing down an awful lot of them in what's supposed to be a historic district. It's on the national record of historic areas. And the more we tear it down, the less historic it is. We get our 20% administration fee. And then we go into the home grant, where almost all of this is set aside for the city of Killeen. Almost all of it. So before we start putting away for affordable housing development, which I would assume is part of where that loan came from, maybe that's just home money we haven't spent before. Let's see what else we can do to actually help existing property owners that rent to low-income families. Let's do with what we have right now instead of waiting for new stuff to be built. And then we've got an $80,000 set aside. And then more administration. The city is getting almost all the money from this. Very few programs, and the programs are getting less than what they requested. Let's see where our care and concern really lies.
Michael Fornino, welcome back. You have 4 minutes.
Since we're talking about taxes, and this is just for the benefit of the young ladies who are here to learn, okay, the government, I don't care if it's city, state, or federal, has no money. Governments have our money. That's how this works. When it comes to CDBG, and any grants for that matter, all I would ask is an ethical distribution of it, because CDBG is a federal grant. As a result, I think that it is incumbent on this council to consider that this is the tax money people thrown in from Tampa, Florida, to Seattle, all the way out to America Samoa. That's their money. So as a result, it should be spent very wisely in the fact that that's a giant trust. I contrast that with who gets the money. I would ask, again, for accountability and ethical distribution of the funds. They're going to be distributed anyway. It's my understanding that most, if not all, of the people who got a lot of the ARPA grants, this is grant money, basically a gift. Most of the folks downtown who claim that they're thriving, they applied for the grants, enthusiastically filled out forms to get everybody else's tax money, but they themselves are not paying their taxes. So perhaps an audit or a comparison to see who is actually applying and what their current status is, whether they're paying their fair share, because that's not fair. Tax money is everybody's money. It's your money, it's my money, it's their money. When it comes to filling out forms for other people's money, a little bit of responsibility, a little bit of ethical behavior should come along with it. So if somebody is applying for it, maybe something along the lines of just cross-check it and see where they are. Are they paying their taxes? Have they been paying their taxes? Things like that. That's fair. As far as other entities, as the previous speaker said, I realize that not everybody's going to get everything that they want. That is just fantasy if ifs and buts were candy and nuts. However, these entities such as IBCC, Friends in Crisis, or Families in Crisis, all of those, they provide a tangible, noticeable, measurable service and support to the community. Now, that would generally go against my conservative principles. However, it's the right thing to do. Consider how much money we're throwing at all these other entities, KEDC, the Chamber of Commerce, and all that by default. We're not seeing a whole lot for our money. Our money could maybe be dispersed a little bit more evenly, a little bit more ethically, a little bit more fairly. All in all, I just think that there are folks here that have the habit, I say here in this town, that greedily fill out forms for grants, which means other people's money, not private, but tax money, which is our money. They will greedily fill out forms to get their hands on tax money, but then they won't pay theirs. That just doesn't wash with me. I mean, maybe add a mechanism. I don't want to speak for and tell Mr. Grady what to do, but I mean, something that simple would be a quick scrub for somebody like him. Say, who's behind on their taxes? Will this legitimately help a worthy cause get out of that situation? Perhaps, but at least have a more in-depth comparison. It'll eliminate conflict of interest and any unethical behavior.
Ms. McNair, one of the things I do want to address that I heard that we helped family and friends out. It wasn't family in crisis because they receive a lot of grants. One of the other things is I don't want the integrity of all the hard work this council did for our downtown Killeen revitalization with ARPA funding. Because when you put statements like that in the atmosphere, it's serious because it's the reputation, the character of the persons that applied for those grants, and the council voted on that. And also the city staff did all the hard work behind it. The word tax, somebody didn't pay their tax. Would you please, for the audience that's listening and also for the residents that are here for the first time, that's a part of this process, how does that work when it comes to the accountability for taxes?
That is written in the agreements that each entity signs, that they are current with any debt that they would have with the city of Killeen. And there are checks and balances between our department, the finance department, even the city attorney's office takes a look at these agreements to make sure that we are funding entities that are in good standing with the city of Killeen.
Mr. Cagle?
And after the fact, if someone has a grant and they're not paying their taxes, there's a whole organization full of appraisers, accountants, and lawyers set up to ensure that they do pay their taxes. It's public information, so it doesn't really require an audit. Just the process will work itself out.
Thank you. And I just want to get this all out the way before I close public hearing, because the council will have to have questions, but you can talk. I can ask you questions during this process. I don't have to close it. Meals and Wheels and community engagement. Our Meals and Wheels program, it did not receive the amount of money that they requested, and also community engagement. Could you elaborate? And I know you were, the committee made the decision.
So that's, I'm glad you said that. The city does seat a committee of citizens that review these applications and make recommendations. One of the things that they considered with Meals on Wheels in particular was they had to give money back to the city for the last program year. There were some shifts in their staffing, so they weren't able to use it all. They do consider that in future funding years. Also, the Meals on Wheels program, they do a great job of serving not just the city of Killeen, but all of, well, I don't want to say all of Central Texas, but a good chunk of Central Texas. So some of the things that they provide to the city of Killeen is not solely for the city of Killeen, and we want to just make sure that when it's possible that we are paying our fair share for the services that are operated here. And then the community engagement unit, when I did the math based on their application, what they ask for is probably just 2% of their overall budget. The staff there use this just kind of as some filler. I know this is Chief Lopez's unit, and he talks with Sergeant Moore about what they're doing. But this is just more for flyers and things like that, incidental. So according to Sergeant Moore, it does not hinder their program, but every little bit helps. He does a magnificent job of making a little go a long way.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay.
Public hearing is closed, and once again, I'd just like to say to the residents that are looking and the from television and the residents are here, if you have more questions concerning our item that we just discussed, please go to www.killeentexas.gov, and you will find Ms. McNair information, our city manager information, our council members, district, and also at large. Please submit your questions, and we will bring the budget back. And on September 3rd, we will set that date to adopt the budget. So you have plenty of time to submit all your questions to your council representative or to city staff. With that being said, Councilmember Adams.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wanted to point out, and I want to thank you and former Mayor Segar for that opportunity to serve on the CDAC years ago, when we put together the priorities for our 5-year plan. And with that, each of the funding mechanisms are separate. So I want to make sure everybody understands you can't cross over money because that will put us in some major trouble with the federal government. And part of that, the community development and the committee also still meets with the public to get input on how we want to implement this year's, and then they have a scoring system. So based on the priority and the scoring system, I think this is how the committee has come back with these recommendations. And so with that, if it's in order, I want to move to approve the committee recommendations with the caveat of the staff recommendation for public service.
In that motion, because for the record, it's PH-24-024. Councilmember Solomon?
Seconded, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Ms. McNair and your staff, you have done an extraordinary job. I have to tell you now before they vote, because once we vote, we have to move on. Thank you for your hard work. All in favor, yes. All opposed, no. Motion carries 7-0. Pursuant to the Texas Open Meeting Law, Government Code 551.001, the mayor now calls a closed meeting of the City Council on the 23rd day of July at 6:10 p.m. Under the following authority, Section 55.1.071, consultation with attorney. The City Council will consult with legal counsel regarding pending litigation, agenda item DS-24-044. The council will be going in a closed meeting. And once again, I thank 2111G Boy Scouts for being here tonight. Thank you for all you do. Yes, ma'am. I'm ready whenever you are. Well, welcome back, everyone. This is Mayor Nash King. We just came back out of closed meeting. And let the record show, we have 5 council members here. The rest of them are in the back. It is 7:06 p.m. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Madam Mayor, I move to
Councilman-
adjourn. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's you.
Yeah.
Councilmember Adams?
I move to adjourn.
Why am I on there?
Second.
Okay, Councilmember Solomon. All in favor?
All right.
Meeting adjourned. Have a good night. Be safe.